The coffee maker gurgled to life at 6:15 a.m., just like it had every weekday morning for the past 17 years. That old Mr. Coffee machine, white with brown stains trailing down its carafe, had outlasted 2 kids, 3 dogs, and what I'd thought was an unshakable marriage. I stood in the dim kitchen light, listening to the familiar sounds of our house waking up, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards near the pantry where the wood had warped, the distant rumble of a garbage truck making its rounds. Diane used to sing while making breakfast, not full songs, just snippets. My Girl or Ain't No Mountain High Enough, under her breath as she scrambled eggs. She'd sway a little as she cooked, her bare feet sliding across the linoleum in the same 2-step she'd done since our honeymoon. But lately the kitchen had been quiet. No humming, no idle chatter about her book club or the neighbors, just the clink of silverware and the occasional sigh. I poured coffee into my chipped World's Best Dad mug, the one Rachel gave me when she was 7, and stared out the window above the sink. The backyard looked smaller than I remembered. The oak tree we'd planted when Michael was born now cast shadows across the entire lawn. The swing set stood rusting in the corner, its chains groaning in the breeze. 25 years in this house. 25 years of birthday parties and Christmas mornings and quiet evenings on the porch. The layoff shouldn't have been a surprise. The writing had been on the wall for months. Whispers about restructuring, sudden closed-door meetings, younger colleagues polishing their resumes. But when my boss called me into his office that Thursday afternoon, his too-tight smile and the folder in his hands told me everything before he spoke. Market condition, streamlining operations, your position being eliminated. The severance package was fair. 3 months' salary, health benefits for 6, a career counselor to help me transition. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, watching co-workers walk to their vehicles, laughing, making weekend plans. Normal people with normal lives. I waited until after dinner to tell Diane. She'd made meatloaf, my favorite, with garlic mashed potatoes and green beans. The kids were grown and gone, Michael in Denver, Rachel in Seattle. So it was just the 2 of us at the table we'd bought at a flea market our first year in this house. I lost my job today, I said. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. She set it down carefully, wiped her lips with her napkin, and for a split second I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear? Disappointment? Then it was gone. We'll figure it out, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Her fingers felt cold. For the first few weeks she was supportive. She helped me update my resume, suggested contacts to call, even cut back on her weekly target runs. When I came home from another interview that went nowhere, she'd pour me a bourbon and say, "Their loss." But then the severance ran out. The savings account shrank. The freelance consulting work I scraped together barely covered the utilities, and without either of us saying it aloud, something between us shifted. I started noticing little things. The way she'd sigh when I mentioned another rejected application. How she'd pause before handing me the mail, her thumb lingering over the bills. The way she stopped introducing me to new people at parties, as if my unemployment was contagious. "Maybe you should take anything at this point," she said one night as we reviewed our budget, her pen tapping against the kitchen table. "Even if it's not what you're used to." I looked up from the spreadsheet. "I'm trying, Diane." "I know you are," she said, but the way she said it, like she was humoring me, made my throat tighten. That night, lying in bed with the space between us feeling wider than ever, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when exactly we'd crossed this line. Was it when I dipped into my 401k, when I sold my golf clubs? Or had this been coming long before the layoff, and I'd just been too comfortable to see it? The clock ticked past midnight. Diane's breathing was slow and steady beside me, asleep or pretending to be. Outside, a branch scraped against the window. The house creaked its usual nighttime symphony. Everything was the same, yet nothing was. I turned onto my side, facing the wall, and closed my eyes. Somewhere beneath the quiet, beneath the exhaustion, a thought whispered, "This isn't about the job." But I wasn't ready to hear it yet. The change happened gradually, like winter creeping into fall. First, it was the little things. Diane started going to bed earlier, claiming headaches. Then she stopped asking about my job search altogether. Our conversations became transactions. Did you pay the electric bill? The Andersons invited us for dinner Saturday. Don't forget your mother's birthday. One Tuesday in March, I came home from a part-time gig at the hardware store to find Diane's sister's car in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I saw them huddled at the table, voices low. When I opened the door, the conversation stopped dead. Diane's sister gave me that tight-lipped smile people reserve for funerals and divorces. Am I interrupting? I asked, setting my keys on the hook. Of course not, Diane said too quickly. Karen just stopped by for coffee. But the air felt thick with words unsaid. Karen left soon after, hugging Diane just a beat too long at the door. That night, Diane turned away when I reached for her in bed. The final blow came on a rainy April afternoon. I was in the garage organizing tools when Diane appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed tight against her chest. We need to talk, she said. Her voice had that tone I'd come to dread, the one that meant she'd been rehearsing this. Inside, she sat me down at the kitchen table, same spot where we'd told the kids about Santa, where we'd celebrated promotions, where we'd planned our future. Now she folded her hands neatly in front of her like she was about to give a business presentation. I can't do this anymore, she said, looking at my forehead instead of my eyes. I've tried, but I'm not happy. The words hung between us. I stared at the familiar chip in the table's edge where Michael had banged his fork as a toddler. Is this about money? I asked, though I already knew the answer. It's about everything, she said. You're not the man I married. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's kid laughed. A car drove by with bass thumping. Life went on. She moved out that weekend. I helped her load the U-Haul because that's what I'd always done, helped her. When the truck pulled away, I stood in the driveway holding a box of things she'd decided not to take. My old college textbooks, a cracked vase we'd gotten as a wedding gift, a photo album of our early years together. That first night alone, I wandered through the house like a ghost. The walls still held our laughter, our fights, our history, but the bed was too big, the quiet too loud. I found one of Diane's hair ties under the bathroom sink and pocketed it like some pathetic talisman. In the weeks that followed, I learned the particular loneliness of abandoned things. Her side of the closet gaping empty, the bathroom mirror no longer fogged by her shower, the grocery list on the fridge with only my handwriting. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. The first month was the worst. I woke up every morning expecting to hear Diane moving around in the kitchen, only to be met with silence. The house smelled different. No perfume, no scented candles, just stale air and my own indifference. I stopped making the bed, left dishes in the sink, let the mail pile up on the counter. Friends called it first. How you holding up? They'd ask, and I'd lie. Doing okay, taking it day by day. But after a while, the calls tapered off. Life moved on for everyone else. Then one morning, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror, pale, unshaven, dark circles under my eyes, and didn't recognize myself. That was the day I forced myself to shower, put on real clothes, and drive to the diner where Mike, my old college roommate, still had breakfast every Sunday. He didn't ask how I was, just slid a coffee toward me and said, "You look like hell." Feel like it, I admitted. We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, the way only old friends can. Finally, he said, "You know they're hiring at the community center, right? Part-time maintenance. Not exactly vice president of operations, but..." I stared into my coffee. "I don't know the first thing about maintenance," Mike shrugged. "You know how to fix a leaky faucet. You're good with people. And it's something." So I took the job. It wasn't glamorous, unclogging drains, patching drywall, changing light bulbs, but it got me out of the house. The work was simple, physical. At the end of the day, I could point to something tangible I'd accomplished. That mattered more than I expected. Slowly, other things started shifting too. Rachel called one night just to talk. Not the usual rushed, "How are you?" before asking for money, but a real conversation. She told me about her job, her new apartment, the guys she was seeing. Listened when I talked about the community center. It was the first time in years we'd spoken without Diane acting as intermediary. I started cooking for myself. Simple meals at first, then more elaborate ones when I realized I enjoyed it. Found an old guitar in the basement and relearned chords I hadn't played since my 20s. Started reading again, slowly working through the stack of books that had gathered dust on my nightstand. The anger came in waves, at Diane, at the company that let me go, at myself for not seeing this coming. But with time, the waves grew smaller, less frequent. One evening in October, I came home from work to find the house quiet, but not empty in the way it used to feel. The dishes were done, the bed was made. A book lay open on the coffee table where I'd left it. I sat on the porch with a beer, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, and realized something surprising. I was okay. Not happy, not healed, but okay. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel like absence, it felt like space. Space to breathe, to figure out who I was without the job, without Diane, without the life I'd thought was unshakable. I took a sip of beer, leaned back in the chair, and let the evening settle around me. The air smelled like fallen leaves and distant fireplaces. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. I was still here. And that, for now, was enough. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, just as I was finishing up at the community center. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and when I pulled it out, her name flashed on the screen, Diane, for the first time in 8 months. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Hello? Her voice was softer than I remembered. Hi, Tom. It's me. As if I wouldn't recognize her, as if her voice hadn't lived in my head for 25 years. Yeah, I said, wiping my hands on my work pants. I know. A pause, then quieter. Can we talk? In person? I leaned against the wall, the cinder block cool through my shirt. Outside, kids laughed on the basketball court. Why? Another silence. Then, almost a whisper, I miss you. I closed my eyes. That was the one thing I hadn't let myself imagine her saying. We met at a coffee shop, neutral ground. Not the place we used to go, but some generic chain with too bright lighting and overpriced pastries. She was already there when I arrived, stirring a tea she wasn't drinking. She looked different. Older, yes. We both were, but also smaller somehow. The Diane I remembered sat up straight, made eye contact, commanded rooms. This woman hunched slightly, as if trying to take up less space. You look good, she said when I sat down. I didn't return the compliment. What do you want, Diane? She flinched, just slightly, at my tone. Then she took a deep breath. I made a mistake, she said. Leaving like that. I thought I needed something else, but... Her fingers tightened around her cup. The apartment feels so empty. I keep turning to tell you things and you're not there. I studied her face, the faint lines around her eyes, the way her lip trembled just slightly. Part of me wanted to reach across the table. The other part wanted to walk out. And the money? I asked. She looked down. That was never really about the money. Could have fooled me. I was scared, she said, finally meeting my eyes. We'd built this life, and then suddenly it was crumbling, and I panicked. I thought if I could just control something. So you left. She nodded, tears welling but not falling. I'm so sorry, Tom. I turned my coffee cup in slow circles. The steam rose between us like a ghost. Why now? She swallowed. I saw you at the grocery store last week. You were laughing with that cashier, the older woman with the red glasses. You looked happy, and I realized I hadn't seen you laugh like that in years, not with me. The truth of that settled between us. How long had we been going through the motions before the end? I don't expect you to forgive me, she said quietly, but I needed you to know I regret it. Every day. Outside, a car honked. Someone shouted a greeting. Normal life happening all around us. I took a deep breath. I need time to think. She nodded, wiping hastily at her eyes. Of course, whatever you need. I stood, leaving my untouched coffee behind. I'll call you. Walking to my car, I felt her eyes on my back. The weight of 25 years, the ghost of what we'd been, the possibility, just a possibility, of what might come next. But not today. Today, I needed to breathe, to sit with this, to decide if the man I'd become wanted to reopen that door. The sun was warm on my face as I turned the key in the ignition. For the first time in a long time, the future felt like mine to choose. I didn't call her right away. For 2 weeks, I let the question hang in the air of my quiet house. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, Diane's voice echoing in my head, "I miss you," and stare at the ceiling, weighing the past against the unknown future. One evening, Rachel called. "Mom told me she reached out," she said carefully. "She tell you what she said?" "Only that she regrets leaving." Rachel paused. "You know I'd never tell you what to do, Dad. But are you happy now?" The question caught me off guard. I looked around my living room, the guitar leaning against the wall, the stack of library books on the end table, the piece of a space that was entirely mine. "I'm okay," I said. "Really okay." "Then that's your answer," she said softly, but it wasn't that simple. I drove past Diane's apartment one evening, not intending to stop, just looking. She was on her balcony, wrapped in a sweater too thin for the autumn chill, staring at nothing. She looked lonely. The sight twisted something in my chest. We'd had good years, more good than bad if I was honest. The way she'd laughed when I proposed, how she'd held my hand through both labors, the pride in her eyes when I got promoted. She hadn't been wrong. I'd changed over the years, stopped trying, taken her for granted. The job loss had shaken me, but her leaving had shattered something deeper. Could we rebuild? Maybe. But not as we were. I called her on a Sunday morning. "Let's take a walk," I said. We met at the park where we used to push the kids on swings. The leaves crunched underfoot as we fell into step, an arm's length between us. "I've thought a lot about what you said," I began. Diane's hands were shoved deep in her pockets. And I took a deep breath. I can't just pick up where we left off. Too much happened, but maybe we could start over, slowly. Her steps faltered. "What does that mean?" "Dinner, maybe counseling. No promises." I stopped walking and faced her. "But Diane, if we try this, it can't be about what I can provide. It has to be about who we are together, the money, the job. None of that can matter like it did." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. "It doesn't. I swear it doesn't." We stood there beneath a bare oak tree, two middle-aged people with a lifetime of history between us. The wind carried the sound of children laughing somewhere distant. "One step at a time?" she asked, offering her hand. I took it. Her fingers were cold, but they still fit against mine the way they always had. "One step," I agreed. It wasn't a happy ending, not yet, but it was a beginning, tentative, fragile, and achingly human. As we walked back toward the parking lot, her shoulder brushed mine, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like an accident. Love shouldn't vanish when the money does. But sometimes, if you're lucky, it can learn to grow again.